When God intervenes in our lives, does he work miraculously or providentially? Let's define our terms. When we speak about a miracle, we're speaking about events that transcend or they suspend natural law. And they were used by God in the Bible times that gave confirmation to the event that was taking place, that indeed he was confirming the messenger and the message. For example, in Acts the 2nd chapter, when Peter preaches about Jesus, he speaks about Jesus being a man that was indeed confirmed as God's messenger in what he did. He did mighty works and wonders and signs. God did this by him in the midst of all those people. It wasn't behind the scenes. It was in the midst of all the people to confirm the messenger as being approved of God. Acts 2 and verse 22. Notice the description. They were indeed mighty works, showing that only God could be working this power. They caused wonderment in the heart of the person that observed it, not because it was unusual, but because it suspended natural law and therefore confirmed that God was approving Jesus as the Son of God, his messenger from heaven as the Son of God. And so we see the works of Jesus in the New Testament. He turned water to wine. He walked on the water. He healed a man born blind. He took a man that had been dead 3 days and raised him from the grave. These were miracles that confirmed Jesus to be sending a message straight from God. And so that's what we see about miracles. But we also notice that God works providentially through natural means or natural laws. For example, in Isaiah 65 and verse 9, we find that God visiteth the earth. He does so by watering the earth with rain. It produced a harvest of grain. And so that God is providing the food for man through these natural laws. So God is working, God is providing, but is this a miracle when a cloud comes in the sky, drops his rain, enriches the earth, and then the grain emerges and we take the grain and we put bread upon our table? No, but it's from God. That's why in the New Testament, Jesus taught us to pray in Matthew 6 and verse 11, give us this day our daily bread, as we pray to the Father. It's not that we're asking God for a miracle, but it's acknowledging God as being the power behind providing us the things of our needs. So he works miraculously in the Bible, but he also works providentially. Now the question is, how does he work in our lives today? When we observe the New Testament, God working miraculously and providentially, we begin to see what is the purpose of the miracles. It's not that God is not able to work a miracle today. No one is restricting his ability. But it's looking into the scriptures and to see what he, not what man, but what he has revealed concerning the purpose of his miracles. We'll find that God had to confirm the messenger, that the message was from God. He did that miraculously because the Bible wasn't complete yet. But in 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter and verse 9, we read, then that which is perfect is come, no longer in part, no longer needed to be confirming that the message is from God. Then that which is in part shall be done away, and those miraculous gifts would cease. The miracles would cease. So we see the purpose of them in Mark 16 and verse 20 and 21, that these apostles went about preaching the word, and that God confirmed the word with these miraculous signs. We now have the faith once and for all time delivered in Jude 3. So there's no need for those miracles. That's why we don't see people coming around and say, I'm going to prove that I am from God. We're going to go to the graveyard and raise the dead. We're going to heal a man born blind. We're going to turn water to wine, and not do that with magic, but by the power of God. You don't see people claiming those types of gifts because their purpose has ended. And we need to understand that. But does that mean that God is no longer working providentially in our lives? When we look back at events, we begin to see how things work together for a lot of times our benefit. God can intervene, and He can change the course of events and even protect us from what men have tried to do. For example, in Paul's life, Acts the 23rd chapter, God promised him in Acts 23 and verse 11 that he would testify to the authorities in Rome, to Caesar in Rome, as he has testified about God in Jerusalem. God promised that. That was a miraculous intervention into Paul's life, that miraculous revelation. But how did he work that out? Because behind the scenes, man, 40 of them, about 40 of them, were planning to kill Paul. How did that plan, how was it foiled? It's interesting when you read Acts 23. You begin to realize that here was Paul's nephew happened to listen to the plan that was being proposed. He went and told Paul. Paul gets him in contact with, through a centurion, to the captain, and the captain begins to make plans with plenty of soldiers to accompany Paul to Caesarea, and he foiled the plot. Was there any miracle involved? Nephew overhearing a plan unfolding, Paul getting in the contact of people who could prepare things to protect him. But God was at work fulfilling His promise that Paul would be safe, not only in Caesarea, but also all the way to Rome. Joseph's life is a testimony of God's providence. He didn't plan for these things to happen. He surely didn't wish for these to happen. But his brothers were jealous, and they put him in a pit. And through that events that happened following that event, we find that he ends up in Egypt. He's put into prison on the false charges of Potiphar's wife. He emerges from prison, finally, and through his wisdom that God gave him, he was involved in being head in the government. And when the brothers finally come and find that their brother is alive and they recognize who he is, in Genesis 50 and verse 20, Joseph could look back and said, "You meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good. And it has happened this day to save much people alive." God was providing for His people, the Israelites, to be fed in times of famine. But He brought together these events: jealousy of brothers, false charges of Potiphar's wife, being forgotten in prison for a time, emerging, giving wisdom to Pharaoh of how to overcome the circumstances of famine, and being placed in that authoritative role to be able to bring life to God's people. That's how God works. But it was through natural means. He didn't intervene miraculously. So what we see from the Bible is that God can work miracles, but His purpose for miracles have ceased. But God warns us about something else in His Word. He warns us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 11 that we are to be aware of false signs, false miracles, false teachers. And we're to be on guard for that, because God allows them to come sometime and sends us a working of error that we can believe a lie if we're not prepared with His truth. So we have to be aware of these things. So when we think about God working providentially in our life, how does that work? Let me give you an example. What if your loved one is in one part of the country and receives very sad news that they have an inoperable tumor and that they have 3 months to live, or if they do surgery to try to remove that tumor, they will leave them in a vegetative state. Those are not good choices. But wonder if you're aware in our area, such as Houston, MD Anderson, that there may be another opinion. And you bring your loved one to talk to those doctors, and they say, "I think we can do something to help you. We've got some new medicine that we can try. We can take the major part of that tumor that's invading your brain. We'll leave the feelers there. And we will take that, leaving you in a good state, but we'll use this new medicine to take care of the rest of it. And one day, to your surprise and to your happiness, you'll find that that tumor is gone from the brain of your loved one. What would you call that? Many people today would call that a miracle. But how did it come about in reality? You heard of a problem. You're aware of doctors that are surgeons that are skilled and knowledgeable. You pray fervently to God for the benefit of that person. And all those things work together. God is at work, but God did not have to use miraculous means to take care of that tumor. Doctors who are skilled, medicine that can help that, procedures that can help that person, and your prayer could bring about the well-being of your loved ones. God is able to alter the course of things already in place, and he can do that without doing a miracle. Here recently, we have learned that Mother Teresa, that she has been accredited with 2 miracles, giving her the fast track to sainthood in the Catholic Church. But when you look at those miracles, you begin to see why they were called miracles by the Pope. And investigating those things, indeed, they were unusual and they caused wonderment. But you'll find that one lady who had a tumor, she was involved in putting a medallion that had the picture of Mother Teresa on her side, and she was considered miraculously cured. A Brazilian man who had a brain tumor, he prays fervently to Mother Teresa, and he is healed and cured of his tumor. Now, these happen after the death of Mother Teresa, and they are used today to show that she is now qualified for sainthood. But when you look at miracles in the Bible, that might be a comparison that we can look at. Do you see a difference in this? For 2 Kings, the 13th chapter, verses 20 and 21, we read of Elisha. He died. His bones were placed in a sepulcher. And one day, a man's body was thrown into that sepulcher and touched the bones of Elisha. And he immediately came alive and stood on his feet. Now there's a miracle. Notice the distinct relationship between Elisha and this man coming alive. God was working through a dead person on this occasion, but they weren't praying to the dead person. In this case, they weren't even praying to God, but God was showing the power that Elisha had as his prophet, even after Elisha's death, that immediate connection. I wonder if we could ask, and what would happen if Mother Teresa's grave was open, and that these 2 individuals would have to look at a picture of her or pray to her instead of God, and touch the bones of Mother Teresa, and they came alive, cured from their tumors immediately. Now there would be a miracle connected with the scriptures. But do you think that proof will be allowed? I doubt it'll happen. But she's on the fast track to sainthood, and she's called upon as being her credentials of doing miracles. Could these be false signs? God warns us about those things. But what we have the Word of God now complete. God says that was the purpose of miracles, in revealing his mind and showing that this didn't come from another man. It came directly from God, and therefore he confirmed that fact through miraculous powers that cause wonderment, because this only could happen from God, and it signified that indeed God was behind these miraculous events. We hold in our hands this confirmed book. May we hold it realizing that it's been miraculously revealed, miraculously confirmed, as we also pray to God each day for him now not to work miracles, but that he'll do his providential work. Thank you for listening.